Hi, everyone who is logged on currently. Thank you so much for joining us. We are actually going to go ahead and get started right at 11:30, and we will let people jump in as they come on. I wanted to go through, I'm Rochelle Hedlund with Goodman Schwartz, and Brandy Patrone is also with me here today. We're going to do some quick housekeeping items before we go ahead and get started, and then we will hop right into it. When you first join the webinar, you're going to see a static screen. You are going to need to click the link on that screen to join the webinar. Keep your webinar link handy. It's located in the confirmation email we sent you. You may need to use it if you need to log back out and on for any reason. We will be recording today, so you won't be able to speak during the webinar to ask questions, but you will be able to use the chat feature to ask questions. Make sure when you do ask a question to mark your chat as a question. Give us a second, and then we will respond as quickly as possible as we go through the presentation. Best practices for viewing these webinars: an Ethernet connection is always best, but a dependable high-speed Wi-Fi connection works as well. If you are on a Wi-Fi, and even if you are on Ethernet, be sure to shut down programs that also use the internet to reduce the risk of them interfering with the webinar. You might experience some buffering right away. That's totally normal, but if it goes on for more than a few minutes, please refresh or rejoin the webinar. Again, using that link that's in the confirmation email we sent you, especially if you can't see or hear us after the webinar actually starts. If you get kicked out or bounced from the webinar for any reason, you'll just want to refresh your screen by clicking the blue refresh button in the dark bar at the bottom of the screen, or again, you can log back out and in. Sometimes that happens. And if for some reason the webinar just doesn't work for you, the recording of it will be available immediately after it wraps up on the APAD Arizona YouTube page. And of course, you can send any questions you have after viewing the webinar to me. My email address is at the end of the PowerPoint presentation today. So we are going to go ahead and get started. This is our third webinar in the series, Legislative Advocacy, How to Get Engaged. We're going to cover today first, I know people are probably wondering, preliminary election results. We're going to start to begin to understand the political world that we're working in at the state level. We are going to talk about how APAD is preparing for the upcoming legislative session briefly. I'm going to provide some context on the legislative process and how it relates to advocacy efforts. And then, of course, we're going to talk about ways you can advocate your opinion with community leaders and legislators and how to do that. And then what you can do today to get engaged and prepared for the legislative session we have coming up starting in January. First off, wanted to go through preliminary election results with you. As many of you probably know by now, Proposition 206 did pass. The result was identical to the polling data. The final result was around 60%. So obviously a very politically popular issue. With the election behind us, the statutory restrictions that we have been talking about are lifted from providers. So now it's critical that APAD members gets the message out about closures, service reductions, program eliminations, if those are going to happen for your organization. So we are going to hear more from various industries. The education community is going to likely talk about the adverse impacts to schools as well. And we really need to demonstrate that our situation is critical to the people that we serve. In addition to Proposition 206, the Flagstaff Proposition 414 did also pass. For APAD members who are providing services in Flagstaff, the minimum wage will go up an additional $2 above the state minimum wage on July 1st of 2017. So that would be to $12 an hour. Obviously noting that both passed, there may be legal challenges to both initiatives. We will, of course, keep you all updated of those legal challenges, and we should all assume that the minimum wage will be going up and going up in January at the state level as we talk about impacts. So need to move forward with these advocacy efforts, definitely, even if legal challenges do arise. So we are in need of providers to tell their story about the impact of Proposition 206, and for the Flagstaff providers, Proposition 414. As we have been, we will be asking you all to contact your legislators in the near future on this issue as we get prepared for the legislative session. And there are plenty of opportunities to get involved today that are outlined in our call to action email that was just sent out to our APAD membership list, and then later in this presentation. If we look at the state legislature, if the results hold, the state Senate will have a 17-13 split with the Republicans maintaining control. There are still ballots outstanding in Maricopa County. I'm sure many of you heard on the news that those who had early ballots mailed to them but did not vote until yesterday, bringing those early ballots into a polling place. Those early ballots are needing to be verified. They do hand check the signatures on each one. So as you might imagine, there are quite a few ballots outstanding, and they are going through that process currently. In Maricopa County, this could have an impact on the state Senate race between Representative Brophy McGee and State Representative Dr. Eric Meyer. Representative Brophy McGee is currently winning. She is obviously a critical player in our strategy to address the Proposition 206, Proposition 414 situation. And if you recall, Representative Brophy McGee is one of our key champions, and with her assistant submitted a ballot statement in opposition to Proposition 206, focusing on the adverse impact to the DD community. In other important races, Senator Sylvia Allen up north will likely be retained, and Senator-elect Sean Bowie, who is a Democrat, will likely win out as well. In terms of our legislative champions, we have not experienced any general election losses with the ballots that have been counted to this point. Again, there are still many ballots outstanding in Maricopa County that could change that. And then, of course, as you all know at this point, we haven't experienced any losses beyond the loss of Senator Dial in the primary election. Looking at the timeline as we head toward legislative session, in the state legislature, they will begin to elect leadership and committee chairs now that the elections are almost finalized. Senate and House Republicans will meet today to determine their leadership. It's most likely that Senator Steve Yarborough and Representative J.D. Mesnard will be elected as Senate President and House Speaker, respectively. And we will have those results. We will have that information soon. The Democrats will also meet this week to elect their leadership, and we will have that information as well. And of course, as things happen, we will keep APEB members up to date of the results from the leadership races, as well as who is chosen as committee chairman. That's all dependent on who is elected to leadership. And the chairman will likely be announced before Thanksgiving. So things will be happening quickly. We will keep you up to date on the state legislature leadership and the committee chairmanships. All will play a big role in our advocacy efforts. So that being said, the legislative process is pretty arduous, and we've spent 2 webinars talking about the legislative process and also the budget process. While they follow the same steps, they are different and they happen at different speeds. The important thing to note when it comes to advocacy is that it is really important for you to understand where you're at in the legislative process. Your advocacy efforts makes you change based on where you're at. And that being said, I'm going to pause for just a second. I am experiencing some technical difficulties, so bear with me. Okay, I apologize that for everyone. I think we have that worked out. So like I said, it's important to understand where you are in the legislative process. I would encourage anybody who has not tuned into those first two webinars to go take a look at those, sort of start to understand the legislative process and the budget process, and ask questions if you have them. Now is the time to do that. Those are available on the APAD AZ YouTube page, and you can watch them at any time. Obviously, it's important to note while you watch those is that we teach the legislative process in a vacuum. And so that the actual process looks and feels different when you participate actively. For example, when you come to APAD Legislative Day, mainly because of human nature. So you have a lot of outspoken personalities in a room. Things are bound to get interesting, and things always do, especially at the state legislature. But nonetheless, you can advocate your opinion effectively regardless with those outspoken personalities. It is not as hard as or as intimidating as most people do think. So with that, legislators do want to hear from real people. So talking about the legislative process is always dry and boring. And regardless of what level of understanding you're at, I think the best teaching tool for it is still Schoolhouse, the I'm Just a Bill video. No matter where you are in your learning, whether you're going to college for it, you're in kindergarten, or you are preparing for a legislative webinar with APAD, it's out there and used for education all the time. But again, understanding that world that you're working in is hugely important. And as we work through the process, we need to understand that we have a citizen legislature. So our elected officials are just like you and me. A citizen legislature creates diversity, but obviously one person can't be an expert in all things, which is where you all come in. Residents of elected officials' assigned areas are called constituents, and your elected officials want to hear from you, their constituents. They rely on you to tell them about the impact of their legislative choices and about other issues or problems in the area that they represent. If we are specifically talking about our state officials, the legislators and the governor often get form emails and letters, which is why we always encourage our folks to tell personal stories to support their cause. And that's, while we provide facts and figures, we rely on you all to make it personal. We'll talk more about what that means a little bit later in the presentation, but always note that a more personal story will always gain a better and more impactful result. So when you are a legislator and when you are trying to make sure you're representing your district well, input on potential issues is appreciated. The more feedback and the more messages from the people in your district, the higher priority the issue becomes. So with that, you can make a huge impact just by getting to know the people who represent you and talking with them frequently. In the case of APAD, we need to be in the ear of our elected officials frequently so that they understand what our issues are. When they're aware of it, we can continue to educate them, and that's where we begin to gain some ground. Now, I'm going to put this plug in really early this time around because obviously we just had a general election. For those of you who are registered to vote, wonderful. For those of you who voted, thank you. It's very important that you vote because it charts the course of political policy and dictates who is elected and chooses leadership. And they, of course, if you watched our other webinars, dictate what is heard on agendas. So voting is very important. When you advocate, it always adds credibility if you are a voter. And so please, if you are not registered or you know of people who are not registered, encourage them to register because it is so easy in the state of Arizona. There are many examples in Arizona's history where races have come down to votes in the single digits, and There are even some experiences, and in state law it says that a tie is dictated by a game of chance. And that has actually happened. So there have been state legislative races that are literally decided by a card game. And that's how that elected official is chosen. So voting is very important, especially at the local level. Even this year at the congressional level, we saw a primary decided by only 27 votes. So voting is very important. Time is always a factor mentioned in voting. In reality, it takes about 14 minutes to actually vote. Less time if you are well educated and vote by mail. To sign up, and I can speak from personal experience, not being a resident of the state and having to register to vote. Arizona does a great job with their voter registration system. As you can see on the screen from those screenshots, all you have to do is register through Service Arizona, which is tied to your motor vehicle registration each year. You can also get to that link using the Arizona Secretary of State's website. If you just Google register to vote in Arizona, you will manage to get to either of these screens. And so really it takes a couple of minutes to sign up, and it is well worth it. You can also sign up right away to vote by mail, get your mail in the your ballot in the mail, and then you don't have to worry about going to a polling place on election day. So that's my pitch on voting. We're 2 years in advance, so time to hop on it early. But that leads me to finding your legislative district. So when any election cycle comes up, it's important to get to know your candidates and research them so that when the time comes and people are elected, you know who you are working with. So this year, APAD did put a list of all the candidates who were running for statewide offices, and we highlighted voter registration in their districts and campaign websites. Obviously, now we know the world in which we are working, aside from some of those races that are relying on the Maricopa County ballots. So now is the time, if you do not know, to figure out what legislative district that you live and work in, and then to identify your state legislators so that you know who you are targeting when you are reaching out to your own personal legislators. So finding your legislative district is super easy. The Arizona legislature has a website. For those of you who have used it before, they have a new look. We have updated the screenshots in the presentation to show you what that new website looks like. It is www.azleg.gov, and you can also identify your legislative district by voter registration cards. But for the sake of today's conversation, we're going to talk about how to look things up online. You have 3 legislators, 1 senator, and 2 representatives. And when you go to the Arizona State Legislature page, you will go to the Members tab. That'll slide out, and it will actually show you members, member roster, who is my legislator. So if you need to find your legislator, click on who is my legislator. It will bring up a page that looks like this. How do I find or contact my legislator? You are going to click to go to the district locator page. And that district locator page will take you to a page that looks like this. That is the same as it has always been. And you will type in your address right up here in the address bar. I know the screenshot is a little bit small, but if you are using it in practice, it'll obviously be much larger. So we put in the address for Family Partners, their administrative offices in this presentation. So it will bring up your location on a map. You can double check that the location is somewhat right. Please make sure you do that. And it is telling us the congressional district and legislative district for this address. The legislative district is 21. So you're going to take that legislative district number. You are going to go back to that members page at arizonaleg.gov and click on member roster. Now, this is a completely different look than before. So once you click on member roster, it is going to show you this page, and you can go ahead and find your House and Senate representatives. So I clicked on both rosters and I pulled the information by district. You can sort by name, district, party, email, phone number if you want to, whatever you want. So for District 21, you would go down, you would look for the 21. Debbie Lesko is the senator for District 21. There is an email for her, a phone number. The same for the 2 representatives, Rick Ray, Tony Rivero, District 21, email and phone number. So there's your contact information for your legislators. Now, we talk often in APAD about making sure that not only do you use your personal district where you live, but that you also look at the legislative district where your organization has its main buildings. So if you have an administrative building, make sure you know what legislative district that is. And if you provide services in different legislative districts, it's important to sort of identify where those services are provided so that you can also target those legislators, because they also need to know that your business operates in their district and that you are experiencing a problem or issue, or you would like to educate them on that. So when you are looking up legislators, it's not just where you live, it's also where you work. And then for the sake of our conversation with APAD, because services are provided, we need to make sure to look up all of the districts where services are provided. So that process can get a little bit long. Luckily, with our internal database, we have a lot of that information cataloged already, and so we can help you track that and keep track of that from year to year so that you don't have to continue to do that and start from scratch. So finding your legislative district, super easy. Now we're going to talk about options on how to be heard when you are reaching out to those legislative officials that you've just identified, or if APAD is asking you to reach out to a certain set of elected officials that we've targeted for advocacy efforts based on where we are in the session, how you can do that and what options you have in doing that. So obviously we have talked about a couple of these already. Register to vote, know your elected officials, get to know your elected officials. We're going to recommend that you sign up for APAD calls to action, use the request to speak system. There are lots of options with emails, letters, and phone calls to state officials, elected officials, and community leaders. You can testify in committee, participate at APAD events, in meetings, and at legislative day. Write a letter to the editor, post to social media, speak to reporters, and foster a relationship and build your own network. So we're going to talk about all of these things. I will note that we are planning to use all of the time that we have scheduled for today. I know that folks are doing this over lunch, so if you do need to drop off, please come back and watch the rest of the presentation after the fact on the on the AZ APAD YouTube page. So, APAD calls to action. A call to action is a communication that calls a group of people to act. Obviously, that seems very simple, but I want to make sure that you all know that APAD sends about 20 different calls to action out per legislative session, depending on what's going on. And each call to action is different. So we're not sending out the same things over and over again. We are asking people to pick up that call to action every single time we ask. And we need people to pick up those calls to action in order to influence state legislators. So the more outreach is done, the better. Believe it or not, people don't often engage with their state legislators. So to the extent that we can be out there educating people and touching base with them frequently, that's very significant. And obviously, the more of that we can do, the more traction we are going to gain on whatever our issue is and whatever we are trying to move forward. And then we need, of course, people to share the calls to action with anyone in their network who will also become engaged. So if you have identified people at your organization who are going to assist with legislative advocacy, you need to share those calls to action and ask them to take action so that we grow our numbers and the number of people who are reaching out. So on the APAD website, for anybody who is not an APAD member, we do have a public list where we send updates pretty frequently, especially during legislative session when we're asking people to reach out to legislators. So parents, the general public, vendors, state officials, all can sign up for our public news updates. And those we share less frequently than we do with the membership, but we still do have that option. So you can do that right on our website, our APAD website. This section is at the bottom of our website page, and you just go ahead, type your email address, submit, and we'll add you to the appropriate list. Now, if you are an APAD member, you are not on our weekend wrap list or our email list that goes out, we can certainly add you at any time, and that is actually separate from this public news update list. So wanted to make sure that you all knew what the calls to action were, that they are coming, and that we do need people to share those. And that's really where we start in asking you to pick up a call to action or do something. And we'll talk a little bit more about the items that you can do. For instance, one of the easiest requests we make in our calls to action is using the request to speak system through the state legislature. So we are not going to walk through the state system online today. We are actually going to do a separate tutorial for that a little bit closer to legislative session. Since we have signed so many new people up, we want to make sure that folks have the opportunity to walk through the system with us so that it's fresh in everyone's mind as we walk into session in January. So I'm going to briefly describe to you what it is, and then again, we will do that tutorial for everybody by webinar so that they can watch a little bit closer to session. So request to speak sounds super intimidating and exclusive. Like if you use it, you will have to testify in a hearing or committee. And that's not what it is at all. It's for everybody. So basically what the request to speak system is a system that allows anybody from anywhere in the state to electronically log their opinion on a piece of legislation in. And in particular, this is useful because then that opinion and that registration is logged with that bill, and it goes with it all the way through the legislative process. And legislators do look at that to weigh how important the issue is and to see comments on it. So the request to speak system is super easy to sign up for. In fact, we can sign you up for the system and verify your account in person at the Capitol. The one inconvenient thing about the electronic registration for the request to speak system is that if you are a new user, you do have to verify your account in person at the Capitol at one of their kiosks. But we have actually been getting people signed up, taking that information, verifying it for folks, and then sending you an email with your login information, letting you know to change your password to something that you will remember so you can use the system during session. After you register in person and are verified, again, that system allows you to weigh in on legislation even if you cannot go to the Capitol. So this is a super easy way for APAD members to log their support or opposition or neutrality even to pieces of legislation, especially funding legislation like the budget. So your opinion is then attached to the bill as it moves through the process. And the best part of it is it takes very, very little time to log in and log that opinion once you get to know the system a little bit. As far as advocacy goes, just getting folks to respond to these calls to action where we ask you to log into the request to speak system and take our step-by-step guide to do that and then log your opinion would make a huge difference if we could get our numbers up a little bit and people who participate and do that. So I will walk you through very quickly how to sign up for the request to speak system on the Arizona State Legislature page that we visited earlier. You go to request to speak, and that is now one of the new tabs on the home page. You then click on the request to speak. It says go to the system, and then you will come up on a page that will prompt you to do several things. You can either sign in or create an account. You will want to create a new account. Remember that that new account will need to be verified at the Capitol, and Goodman Schwartz staff are happy to help you with that. So please, if you do sign up, let us know, and we will absolutely verify your new account at the Capitol, or walk you through how to do it yourself if you are there. So in addition to the request to speak system, the most common call to action that you will hear from us is on emails, letters, and phone calls. And so those who have read and acted on the APAD calls to action, we will often reach out with certain talking points and ask you to reach out to a specific set of state legislators or your own state legislators, and either send an email, make a call, or send a letter, depending on what you're most comfortable with. So for those who are comfortable, we want to make sure that you know that these calls to action will be on the way. You should do, when we do request emails, letters, and phone calls, what works best for you and what you are most comfortable with. If you don't know how to use email, please make a phone call. If you don't like making a phone call and don't like email, please send a letter. Again, it's whatever is most comfortable for you, but we do need everyone to pick up those calls to action because it does make a big, big impact. APAD will always provide talking points that give you important facts and figures that we're trying to convey to state legislators, and we'll give suggestions on how to incorporate those facts and figures into a personal message. So you will only really need to work your story into that communication. We try and get as in-depth as possible to save you the bulk of the work in creating the structure for the message. What we ask is that you personalize it, because those personal stories are always the most impactful. When you do reach out, it's important that you're respectful and brief and to the point as possible, but that you also tell your full story. Make sure that they know that you are from their district, that you either live in or work in their district, and most legislative officials and their staff, if you are calling or even if you are emailing, they'll ask for your address to verify if you were from the district anyway, so please always provide it. Don't be intimidated by reaching out. We did hear from some APAD members that they're comfortable with using our talking points in our example letters or emails, but what got them to hesitate to press send or stick the letter in the mail or make the phone call is that they didn't want to get hard questions from the legislators that they would struggle to answer. And honestly, it's great if you do get questions, but that's what we are here as staff to help with. And we can absolutely help you get started with a response, respond, or help you with whatever you need. If you do get any questions from legislators, it's always okay to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I can get back to you. And that's a great opportunity for additional follow-up as well. So in addition to the request to speak system and communicating with your legislators through various forms as emails, letters, or phone calls, you can also testify in committee. And testifying in committee, it sounds really scary, and for the most part, APAD staff and leadership are going to handle this piece of the advocacy. But if you enjoy public speaking, you feel like you have a good story to tell, please let us as APAD staff and your employer know that you are willing to testify or talk to legislators personally. I will cover testimony briefly, only because we have a pretty shallow pool of people who are willing to go out and tell their story in a legislative committee hearing, but testimony should always be respectful and brief and to the point as possible, and you should tell the full story. So just like those other communications, you need to get to the point quickly, but you also need to put a personal spin on it so that it is impactful in the way you tell the story. And if this is something that you would like to do or explore, we can help you with the talking points to keep the messages succinct and to the point, and we will always help you if you wish to testify on anything in getting it set up and staying on message with the APAD talking points and whatnot. So if you are interested, please reach out to us on testifying. So in addition to all of the items that we do at the Capitol, or while we're not at the Capitol, we do also hold an advocacy event each year. APAD Day at the Capitol is typically held toward the beginning of session. We hold it each year, and what happens is APAD staff coordinate meetings with legislators, and we host a lunch at the Capitol. In 2016, we had over 100 APAD members attend, and the outreach and advocacy associated with the event generated really needed interest with legislators. So the event went very well, was super effective, and we heard from attendees that the meetings and that scheduling component went really smoothly. So we are hoping to repeat that in 2017. The 2017 Legislative Day is on Monday, January 23rd. If you would like to attend, be sure to tell the individual who usually attends the APAD meetings for your organization that you want to attend and have them RSVP to us. And I will just put this in, if you are not all that confident with talking to legislators at this point, that's okay. We will always make sure that you have a leader for your meeting who is confident in talking to legislators and conveying the message that we are going to convey on the day of that event. But we do encourage all APAD members who are interested to attend that day. It's a great opportunity to do outreach and to generate interest around our events, to sit down with people in person. In addition to that, this year we'll be trying something different, and several organizations will be, we'll have a week at the Capitol where they have the option to bring a couple more people from their organization and sit down with their state legislators, provided we can get the meetings, so that they get a little bit more time and get some more people from their group to have that experience. At Legislative Day, we do get a little bit limited by space. We are coordinating a lot of meetings, and most legislators can only fit 4 to 5 people max in their offices. So that's something new this year. If you aren't able to attend Legislative Day, or you want to really have an experience for your own organization, we can certainly work with you to work you into one of the weeks at the Capitol, so that you can bring folks down, have meetings with your legislators, and have that experience. So in addition to everything we ask our folks to do during session, we are also building that up with media outreach, and we are always trying to get placement in the media for our issues. So I'll talk about what we need from you all when we do reach out to the media, both print and TV. So reporters, for the most part, are most interested in how issues affect real people. So when we do outreach, we need a big bank of people who are willing to speak with reporters when they ask. So when we ask for people to speak with the media, we want you to be always open and accessible to them. Obviously, they want to sit down with you. They want you to tell your own story, and they want you to tell your own story honestly. So no spin on it. A reporter is only doing their job when they ask questions, and they obviously want the most factual article, the most impactful article possible if they're working on an issue. So APAD does help coordinate and can offer advice when talking to reporters. If you are working with somebody per our request, we will always coordinate the meetings and interviews with you and assist you in preparing for those. So you don't have to feel intimidated when talking to media. Of course, you do need to be willing to be accessible to them. That means willing to sit down in person, talk to reporters over the phone, and of course, allow them a peek into your organization and lives. So in addition to media outreach with reporters and TV media, we also ask people to sign or write letters to the editors. And a letter to the editor is a way to make your opinion known to the community. I'm sure you have all seen the letter to the editor opinion section of your newspaper. What people don't usually know is that many letters to the editor are actually ghostwritten, and community leaders sign on to those because they believe in the issue. So we can do the same thing. We can assist you with drafting a letter to the editor for media and print in your area, and then we can work through the crafting process with you so that you end up with a product that's obviously on message with what we are trying to convey to elected officials. And that changes day by day in the session sometimes, so it's really important to coordinate those efforts. But it's also important to have local people sending in to their local publications. So if you are ever interested in either talking to the media or being part of that bank, and in addition writing a letter to the editor or signing a letter to the editor, we would really appreciate it if you'd reach out to us. And again, my contact information is at the end of the slideshow for you to do so. And in addition to that, social media is now a great way to interact with elected officials. So more and more we are moving toward visual, something that is quick and easy, and many people use Facebook and Twitter. So APAD has actually provided its membership with a list of elected officials and the links to their Facebook and Twitter accounts where they exist. What we would ask is that in getting to know your elected officials, you do add them on your social media accounts. That gives you a chance to follow what they're doing, and it also gives you a chance to respond to them. If you get into a situation which you're comfortable sharing APAD social media posts or your own opinion with your elected officials, this is a great and quick way to make an impact with them. That being said, APAD does have a Twitter and Facebook account, so please like those and follow us on Twitter if you have not already. So we are now going to talk about how you build your network. So fostering relationships with your legislators and community leaders, and then building your own network so that we can spread calls to action and get more and more people to talk about the issues that we are hoping to move forward. So obviously, it's very important for you to get to know your legislators and community leaders. It's important to note that our citizen legislature, they are regular people like you and me. Again, they're not experts on everything. Just like you and I aren't experts in probably rocket science or, healthcare in some cases, or dentistry. They need you to tell them what's going on, and they are elected officials, so they should be open to meeting new people and hearing you out, in addition to having you attend their public events that they hold. So a great way to get to know your community leaders, attend those district meetings, for example, coffee chats or fundraisers, open houses, town halls, an event that they've put out on social media, and just introduce yourself and have them get to know you over the long run. And this is a long-term investment. Obviously, it takes a little bit of time to get to know somebody, and it obviously will take quite a bit of time to educate them on your issues. You can get the information on their events by signing up for their email lists. At this point, many elected officials do have official email lists or even campaign email lists that they send different messages out to pretty frequently. It's a great way to learn about different events, and it's also a great way to learn about what issues are important to them. Again, interacting with elected officials on social media is a great way to follow up if you have just met them. And then in addition to that, when you email, write, or call during legislative session, you are only growing that relationship with that person. So we always talk about building your bank of goodwill before you need it. Fostering relationships, building relationships, it is a long-term commitment, but it is well worth it, because when you are advocating, it helps to have that relationship established. So when you are out meeting with people and building that bank of goodwill, obviously you want to also be educating them on the disability community and its needs. Exposure is really key. So like I said, long-term goal, if you're meeting somebody and you're constantly educating them on a particular issue, as they become personally aware of that issue, then they bring that knowledge back to the Capitol. And then when we sit down and have meetings with them at the Capitol, they're already in a place where we can jump right into talking about what's going on at that particular moment. In addition to getting to know your elected officials, you also are going to want to build your own network. So you have a couple of different networks that you can work here. So you have your workplace network, so your organization, people who care enough to advocate legislatively on behalf of these issues. And then also your personal network, so your family, your friends, your acquaintances, your peers. So in the workplace, some quick tips on how to build your network. We're not asking you to build a coalition of 100 people. What we're asking is that you start somewhere and that you identify even just one person who is passionate about the issue, so that you can either share the calls to action with them, or the best possible scenario is that you can have them organize efforts. And for example, some organizations use a parent or a retired board member, a staff member that is super passionate about letting people know what's going on. And then that person goes out and sets up an email list of interested people. Now, of course, we would invite all of those people to sign up for our APAD lists and updates and would welcome them to do so. But it's also okay if you have your own internal list of people who are signed up, so that you can share things quickly. So then that person that that is going to be your point person on legislative advocacy efforts would share calls to action and would motivate people to respond when those calls to action are shared. Of course, we know that the reality is that time is limited and that people are always hesitant to step out of their comfort zone. So even if you can only get a couple of people to get educated on some of these issues and then ask them to take up those calls to action, that's still a big win, because we're spreading the message beyond just our 84 APAD members and the representatives who engage frequently from those members. In your personal network, just identify people in your life who care about the issue that you're working on. Ask them to take up the calls to action and share the message with those who care in their networks. That's how a real grassroots effort works. So in order for all of our advocacy efforts, all of the things that we have talked about so far to work effectively, we need them to go outside of our membership. So we need all of those in our network to share our messages with their own networks, workplace or personal. And again, this can be one or two people, but it's still spreading the message. Overall, it's about identifying who those people are and making sure they know when to help and how to help. That's very crucial to any grassroots legislative advocacy effort. So my advice in building networks is always to start small, to set goals, and then to grow the group of people who do outreach. We are obviously happy to assist with network building. We can offer training, more in-depth insight if you would like, and we'll also be talking more about it as we move forward with everybody, because we are encouraging all APAD members to build their networks. So we've talked about things that you can do, building your network, fostering relationships. So now, how do you take that information and act on it? So here are some to-do items. And we've been talking about this for months and months, but it is really important that you identify some things that you can do and that you act today to do those things. We're really, really close to the 2017 legislative session. We need to have a bigger and better advocacy response next year, especially given that Propositions 206 and 414 have now passed, and that our situation is that much more dire because of those things. So things that you can do today: identify your legislative district and legislators. We walked through that earlier. Sign up for our emails if you are not. Register for the Legislative Request to Speak system. Tell APAD staff if you are interested in testifying or talking to the media. Please, please, this is very important. If you are willing to talk to the media, we need to know about it. Friend, like, or follow legislators and APAD on social media. And be on the lookout for calls to action from APAD. Now, we have lots of meetings and events that are coming up very, very soon. I know that folks are probably looking for answers currently on Propositions 206 and 414. So the most important thing you can do is attend our APAD meetings and events. Be sure to participate in the upcoming phone call we have scheduled. That's in that call to action email on the election that we sent out just before this webinar. We'll be pulling together APAD members who are willing to speak to the media or who have questions about speaking to the media to help them figure out what their story is and how we can help them get it in line with the key points that we are trying to get across when we are doing media outreach and having articles placed. In addition to that, we are also going to have our last webinar in December. We will have a seminar on Proposition 206 with Gamage and Burnham in early December. And we are also going to cap our training series off with a Day at the Capitol training. That event information has gone out several times, but just to recap, we wanted to give individuals who want more training, specifically in interacting with elected officials and forming their argument, their elevator speech, their talking points. And we wanted to be able to do that at the Capitol because it's very important to sort of get your bearings before legislative session. It can be an unfamiliar place, and we'll go ahead, we'll give you a tour. We'll look at some of the committee hearing rooms. We'll work in some of those rooms. We'll do role playing on how to address elected officials. And then we may have some other special guests from the state legislature pop in from time to time to assist us with the goings on of the day. So be sure to get that on your calendar. Again, those details did go out this morning and have also gone out several times in the weekend wrap and other call to action emails. And then finally, APAD Legislative Day is January 23rd of 2017. We would love for you to participate. We are making it bigger and better. We are on the House lawn this year, much more visible than where we were last year. And our lunch will be a little bit bigger than it was in 2016. So we're really hoping to make that event big. And then finally, be building your networks, fostering those relationships with elected officials, and ask your networks to do the same, to do these items that we have up on the screen. So with that, actually, I'm coming in really early, which is just fine. If you do have any questions, be sure to type those into the bar. We'll go ahead and answer those. And if you think of something later, be sure to email me at rochelle@goodmanschwartz.com. I'll give it a couple seconds here if we don't have any questions. Thank you so much for tuning in. Brandy, I know that you're on. If you have anything to throw in, you can do that too while we wait for questions.
Just want to thank everybody for participating today and learning more about advocacy. And again, if you have any questions, please let us know.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for calling in. Excuse me. If you do have questions, please feel free to email me. And we will see you at events coming up and our next webinar.